You know, the biggest challenge that we face in life is dealing with coming to terms with dichotomy. And what I mean by that, if you know what the word dichotomy means, it just means two things in opposition. But life is an exercise in negotiating dichotomy in really every aspect of our lives. And what I mean by that is that if you think about a lot of the problems that you have in your life, or a lot of the points of conflict that we experience, and I'm talking about like internal conflict as to like which way do I want to go with something, or external conflict with another person, what you see is this it's this inability that we have, or this frustration that we have, coming to terms with the fact that existence itself is dichotomous. It contains within everything, within every human being, and within every concept and every reality in life, there is opposition. And it would be very neat and very clean and very easy if we were always okay coming down on one side of the dichotomy or the other. But what happens, and what is complicated about life, is that there is nothing that is just one-sided. Everything contains an or. Everything is a kind of an either or and both. And that is it's a very hard thing to negotiate in life. And I'm being very abstract right now. What am I talking about? Well, there's a scene in Apocalypse Now, and I'm gonna do a video. I've been promising it for a while, but I'm gonna do a video on Apocalypse Now. But there's a scene in Apocalypse Now toward the beginning. It's one of my favorite moments in cinema, where this soldier played by Martin Sheen, who's been at war in the Vietnam War and has, supposedly seen and done terrible things. He's on leave. He's in this hotel. He's basically like on a bender. He's like drinking himself, almost to death in a hotel in Saigon, what used to be called Saigon. And so he's in this hotel and he's on this bender. And if you know anything about the making of the movie, you know that actually at this time, Martin Sheen himself, who was an alcoholic, was going through a huge kind of personal breakdown. And he ended up having a heart attack while filming Apocalypse Now. And he was only 36 years old? 36 or 38. But yeah, he had a heart attack in his late 30s filming Apocalypse Now. And he got a few weeks off, and then he had to come back. Coppola's like, he's got to get back. He's got to keep going. But anyway, there is a scene when he's on this bender in the hotel room, and he's just staring up at the ceiling and whatever. We've all been there in some form or fashion. And he says, when I came home from the war, he says, when I was in the jungle, meaning when I was at war, okay, when I was at war in the jungles of Vietnam, he says, all I could think of was getting home, getting out of the jungle, going home. And then he says, but when I was at home, all I could think of was getting back to the jungle. In other words, what he's saying is, yeah, it sucked to be in the jungles, at war. It sucked to be, shot at. It sucked to get, whatever that trench foot or jungle rod is that they would get on their feet if they weren't careful, and insects and all of the awful aspects of being at war in a jungle. He says, yeah, when I was in the jungle, I thought, man, I want to get the hell out of here. I hate this place. I just want to go home where it's safe, and my wife is, and my family, and civilization, and I can get a shower and eat a nice meal and all of that. So he wants to go home. He wants really badly to go home. But then he goes home, and guess what? Home ain't so great either. He says, I just kept thinking about getting back to the jungle. Well, why would he want to get back to the jungle? If the jungle was where the war was, the jungle is where death is, if the jungle is where fear is, and, like I said, insects and bad meals and stuff like that, rats. Well, he'd want to get back to the jungle because a part of him wanted that, missed that. And, it's interesting. There's it is a truism that war is hell. But at the same time, there's a lot of aspects of war that soldiers miss. There's there can be a kind of a suspension of the normal everyday life. There can be adrenaline. I remember watching a documentary. It was called First Kill. I think you can still get it on YouTube. And these soldiers who were in Vietnam, who were tunnel rats. So like, if you think about what the tunnel rats did, that was some hardcore stuff. I mean, they would go into these tunnels that the Viet Cong had dug, these really often very narrow. The tunnels would be very narrow and they would kind of open out to larger areas, but the Viet Cong dug these tunnels. And so these tunnel rats, these American soldiers, would go in here and would engage in combat at times in these tunnels. And, you know, if you think about what kind of combat that was, you know, right up on somebody, you know, the gun in the face or the knife in the face, or, you know, hand to hand, that's some intense stuff. And the claustrophobia and being in those tunnels and everything. So the point is, this was some hardcore stuff. But you know, these tunnel rats that they interviewed, and maybe they just selected guys who felt this way for the interview, I don't know. But these guys talked about how they missed war. Some of them even talked about how they missed killing. That it was hard for them to come back to, that there was something within themselves, a kind of an animalism that was unleashed that felt free in a sort of a Freudian id-like way. You know, Freud believed that our animal selves, which he called the id, were often at war with our civilized selves, which he called the superego. Because there is a price that we pay to enter civilization, to enter safety, to come home. And that price is that we have to we have prohibitions put on our behavior and on our feelings, and we have to act in a civilized, buttoned up manner, and we can't really say what we're thinking, and we can't really, you know, express the dynamism within inside quite often. So some people, you know, missed the adrenaline of being in the jungle, missed the kind of the animalism of running for one's life or fighting for one's life. And they talk about this. These soldiers talk about this in the interview. So in Apocalypse Now, when Martin Sheen says that when he finally gets home, all he can think about is getting into the jungle, he's saying, it is as if I have two natures, and one nature is at home in one place, and one nature is at home in the other place, and there is conflict between the two that I cannot resolve. And that's really what Apocalypse Now, the movie, is about. It is about that conflict and the inability to resolve that. But anyway, I'll talk about that for a later time. So what does that have to do with real life? Well, look, the thing is that every choice that we make in life has a negative. It has a downside. You know, there's that Poison song, every rose has its thorn. Well, that is true. And, you know, we accept that as a truism. You know, we nod our heads when people say that. But in fact, it's actually a very bitter pill for us to swallow most of the time, because most of us do not like having our happiness or our pleasures or our choices muddled with dissatisfaction. And there is no choice that you can ever make that will not entail dissatisfaction. You know, think about like relationships and monogamy and infidelity. We tend to be very judgmental when someone cheats on someone else, as we put it, or has an affair. And I'm not saying that it's fun to be cheated on. I've been cheated on before in a relationship. I'm sure everybody has. It's not like the best feeling in the world. But at the same time, you know, we have to recognize that there are very real and legitimate motivations for everyone to feel dissatisfied, or I shouldn't speak for everyone, but for most people to feel a dissatisfaction in monogamous relationships. Because when you choose to be with someone, no matter how wonderful that person may be, or how great they are for you, or how good of a person they are, whatever, when you choose to be with someone, you are, generally speaking, unless you've, you know, got an arrangement or it's polyamorous or whatever, and that's a whole other topic, you know, for another video, maybe we can talk about that. But for most people, you know, just the norm is that most people more or less expect a monogamous, semi-monogamous relationship, right? And so, but what happens is when you enter into a relationship, you are foreclosing other relationships and other ways of being. And what do I mean by other ways of being? Well, the people that we are with, whether it's friends, and you know this, the people that we are with, whether it's friends or it's lovers or whatever, or family, they activate different parts of ourselves. And you know this. I mean, think about how when you're with certain people, you act a certain way, and with other people, maybe a bit of a different way, or you feel like you can talk about certain things with this person, but not with this person, or when you're with this person, you find yourself becoming maybe more childlike or more adult or whatever, right? Different people activate different parts of ourselves. There's a kind of an alchemy that occurs when people interact with each other. And I don't know if it's at the level just of like the mind and cognition, or if it's like pheromones that we're giving off, or if it's like at the level of a soul, if there's actually something going on, if we have souls, the level of like souls interacting. But whatever it is, there's a kind of an alchemy that occurs when people are with each other. And not just romantically, but romantically often the more intense form of that. Well, when we fuse with someone in whatever way we do, then that generally is either foreclosing or is pushing to the side in some way other relationships, because we only have so much time, we only have so much energy to devote to the relationships and the people in our life. And then when it comes to romantic relationships, our society has evolved to more or less preference monogamous relationships. I know with a lot of exceptions or whatever, but I'm just talking about the norm right now. I'm talking about expectations. And so, it's a lot to commit to a person and know that you are shutting off different ways that you could experience yourself. And so it is, and that's why people who are into polyamory say, well, you should be polyamorous because then you're not shutting off things. That's true to a degree, except it does seem that there still are only so many like hours in the day. So if you're going to be polyamorous with 2 people, then you can't get to 3, or 3 you can't get to 4. So whatever I'm saying, it's still valid. And so there is a cost. There is a cost associated with every choice, is what I'm trying to say to you. And it is very difficult in life to negotiate this sort of cost-benefit analysis, because if you think about someone we're getting back to like infidelity, if you think about someone who is torn between like 2 different people, what's going on there is that it's almost like they are torn between 2 different versions of themselves, both valid, right? And I really hate it and I understand people don't like the idea of cheating, and I understand there's an ethical issue there, and I understand that nobody likes being cheated on. But I do really hate it when and we all do it, when we boil down the complexity and the soul-wrenching nature of these kinds of choices down to, he just wants to screw some 20-year-old or whatever, like with the Jason Momoa thing. The cliche for these types of stories is that the guy became a big superstar, and now he wants to have sex with younger women, and so that's what's going on, and we can all like shake our fingers at him. Well, several things. First of all, having sex with the younger women, that's not nothing. I'm sorry. I mean, biology is a thing. And biology is what makes you want to have sex with people anyway. It's what makes babies. It's what feeds into romance. So don't tell me biology doesn't matter. And yes, I think that there are things far more important than the superficial. But I'm just saying, let's not be babies here. Wah, he wants to have sex with other people. Wah, it's much more complicated than that. And it may be, in fact, that for somebody like Jason Momoa, it's not just about having sex with a younger person. The dynamics of his relationship have changed a lot, because I've seen interviews I've read interviews with him. And he talks about how when he met his wife, Lisa Bonet, that he talks about her. He talked about meeting her in this weird sort of way, like he was meeting an idol. He said that he had a crush on her when he was younger, and she was on the Cosby Show. And that when he met her, he just kept saying to himself, oh my God, this is Lisa Bonet. And you have to think, Lisa Bonet, she used to be a pretty big star. She was married to Lenny Kravitz. So when Jason Momoa, who was a nobody when he met her, I'm sure he was seeing her through a kind of a haze, a kind of a fantasy And this is what we all do when we fall in love. And here's the other thing, right? Is that when you fall in love, initially, you are not falling in love with a real person. You are falling in love with your perception, your subjective perception of them, filtered through a kind of a haze of like your fantasy of who the right person is and who you think this person is. And the process of a relationship is actually the long process of, first of all, losing your fantasies about that person, seeing who the person really is after the haze of everything is sort of worn off, and then asking yourself, okay, can I deal with this? Or is this enough for me? Or is this okay? And that's a question that you keep asking throughout your life. And I know there are some moralistic people who say, you get married until death do you part. Okay, well, that's nice. And I'm not saying that's not beautiful and noble and wonderful, but I am saying that let's not pretend that these are simple questions or these are simple issues. There's a lot of conflict involved. And, and so my point with the Jason Momoa thing is that, okay, so at first she's kind of got the upper hand in the relationship. And I hate to put it in such cold terms, but look, let's be honest about things. There is a kind of a calculation that goes on in everyone's mind when they are dating. Could I get someone better or not? Yeah, I love this person, but also, man, they're really kind of a screw up. Do I want to be with someone who's so screwed up for the rest of my life or whatever? There's all these calculations going on. And so, Jason Momoa, when he married Lisa Bonet, she had that upper hand, and he was seeing her sort of through this, I'm sure, this glaze of like movie star. And, oh, she was married to Lenny Kravitz, and oh, she's so cool, and she wants to be with me. I'm a nobody. Well, what's happened now is that the positions have shifted. And she now, and I don't mean to be in this in a cold way, but she's like a has-been. There are some of us who still remember who she is and that she was married to Lenny Kravitz, but things move on, and now Jason Momoa is this big star. And what happens in those kinds of shifts is that the way that you see your partner changes. It's not just that he's got some big ego now and I just want to go screw 20-year-olds. I mean, it may be that, but I think there's a lot more going on. And when people reach their 40s, where Jason Momoa is at, it's very common. Look, I can tell you, I'm 41. It's very common to do a kind of a life assessment. Where am I? Am I where I want to be? Am I heading where I want to be? What am I dissatisfied with? And we call it a midlife crisis, but it's not a midlife crisis just in the sense of some guy wanting to get a red car and a younger woman. It's a midlife crisis in the sense that when we hit middle age, we are forced to confront the ways in which we have failed at what we were hoping to do in life and the ways in which we succeeded, but also we give ourselves, there's a chance for us to there's a kind of a feeling of a last chance to reorder or reset some things in our lives that are not right. And this is why the philosopher Carl Jung said, and the psychoanalyst Carl Jung said, life begins at 40. He was saying that prior to 40 or prior to middle age, people are so concentrated on just getting some stuff done. Okay, I need to graduate from college, or I need to get into a trade. I need to establish a career. I want to meet somebody. Most people want to have kids. I don't, but most people want to have kids. There's all of these things. So people spend their 20s and they spend their 30s generally doing all of these things. And I'm not saying those things aren't without a great deal of meaning. They're very meaningful. But what happens is when people hit their middle age, when say they hit 40, there's a kind of a taking a sort of a breath that occurs, a kind of a stopping midway through the journey, and a kind of assessment of like, okay, what am I doing? What does this all mean? Why am I not happy? Why am I dissatisfied, right? And that's why Jung said that life begins at 40, because when people hit that age or around that age, that kind of existential assessment or reassessment occurs. And yes, sometimes it causes people to flip out, and sometimes people make bad decisions, and maybe sometimes they don't. How many people do we know who have reached middle age who realize that the relationship that they're in is just not a good one, and they get out? We don't know Lisa Bonet. She could be the biggest witch to live with. I don't know. Maybe they haven't had sex in 20 years. Well, 20 would be a long time. They do have children. But anyway, I'm just saying we don't know. But I'm saying these things are very complicated. And I really get tired of this sort of I have to say, almost misandrist narrative that develops when people break up. It's like, oh, it's got to be the man's fault, and he just wanted to have sex with a 20-year-old, as if we are not all grappling with our age and our mortality and the desire to have sex with 20-year-olds. I mean, okay, 20 is not really my ideal age range, but I'm just saying, look, why do we pretend that we don't get these things that we all get? I guess because they're difficult. They're hard truths. I don't like the idea that the man in my life might be looking at me thinking, geez, she's kind of a mess. But I'm sure he thinks that a lot, because I am a mess, right? So none of us like these realities, but so the dichotomy thing that I'm talking about, what I'm trying to say is that we want in this life, what we so want is to have pleasure without pain, happiness without loss, love without dissatisfaction. We want all of these things, and we want to make choices that we can feel 100% good about, and none of that is possible. None of that is possible. You will always be doubting. You will always be kind of wondering. You will always be somewhat dissatisfied. There will always be pain. There will always be pain. And I don't say that to be negative, and I don't say that to be hopeless. I just say that because it is an interesting condition of life. And if one cannot come to terms with that in some way, then one will spend one's life fighting so hard against these conditions and feeling like life has somehow like mistreated me. And I feel that at times. Why can't I just have like happiness without loss, happiness without, pleasure without pain? Why? And it's interesting too, if we want to think about this from a spiritual perspective or a biblical perspective, it's interesting to think about, the origin story, for instance, in the Bible. The book of Genesis, the whole Adam and Eve story, what happens there is that God creates this perfect Garden of Eden. Everything is whole. WHOLE. Everything is one. Everything is united. God walks in, he walks with man. They talk. Man and woman do not realize that they are separate genders. They don't have any like shame or awareness of that yet. So they are one in a sense. Everything is unified. Everything is in harmony. Everything is perfection. But then what does God do? God puts this one tree in the Garden of Eden. He says, you can do everything you want. This is all for you. Jesus, are you serious? I'm in my car. Like, speaking of like no pleasure without pain, like here I had this beautiful video going, and now I'm next to someone who has an earthquake going inside their car. No, they just turned it off. Okay. I just don't understand why speakers of that nature are necessary. So God creates this garden, and he says, you can, it's perfection. Everything is wonderful. Everything is in harmony. You can do whatever you want to do, but there's just one little thing you can't do. You can't eat of this one tree, which just happens to be the tree of knowledge. You can't do that, but you can do anything else. Well, look, come on. When you tell someone that there is one thing that they can't do, what do you know that you're setting them up to do? You're setting them up to do that thing. All right? And here's my point. God was setting them up to fail. All right? He was setting them up to fail. Why else have just one thing that you can't do? Why not have multiple things? But there's one thing. He gives them one thing they cannot do, because one is all you need. All you need is the choice for something else. And then you've created dichotomy. Once you have allowed that there is another option, once you create a second thing, then you have created dichotomy. You have created difference. That is why when God's first act of creation in the book of Genesis, and I'm not saying these are true stories, okay, people who are not Christians, I'm just saying it's an interesting story that tells us something about life on a deep level. God's first act in the book of Genesis is he says, let there be light. There was darkness before, there was nothing, and then he says, let there be light, as in let there be other. Let there be dichotomy. Let there be now dark and light. So the foundational event of creation was the creation of other, of dichotomy, of two. And you can see it in the genders. What happens when they eat of the tree of knowledge? They realize, oh my God, I'm a man, you're a woman. We need to cover up. They understand there is now a dichotomy. And God puts that one tree that they can eat, that one tree in the garden, he gives them one single prohibition because he is setting them up for the introduction of another choice. Yes, you can do this, but you can do this. And now dichotomy is established. And so what the Genesis story is a metaphor for is the reality of dichotomy, that and the kind of conflict between two things that we find plaguing us in almost every aspect of our life. You know, and what Genesis tells us, the book of Genesis is telling us there, is that the introduction of evil and of unhappiness, the thorn on the rose, that was not some screw up, something that happened that wasn't expected. No, it was not a bug in the system. It was something that was actually built into the system. It was a feature of the system. Suffering is a feature of the system. Conflict is a feature of the system. Dichotomy is a feature of the system. You know, I mean, all evil is the absence of good, and vice versa, right? And so the point is that because everything has gone from this state of wholeness to a state of something that is in dichotomy, that is fractured. I'm talking about metaphorically, right? Because that is what existence is, then everything we experience is always tied to a negative. You can't have good without evil. I mean, these are basic like truisms, but in our reality, at least, I'm not talking about if there's a heaven or another life or another dimension or whatever, which I think there is of some kind. You know, I am a spiritual person, but in this world, there is no pure unadulterated happiness or pure unadulterated good or pure unadulterated romance or friendship or anything. Everything has thorns. Everything is dichotomous, right? Because the whole is both. The whole is both good and evil. It's this person and this person. It is everything, right? The whole is yes and no. But we cannot experience the whole. You know, we are limited mortal beings with confines to our body and our souls and minds. And so we can only experience pieces. And so life is an experience of different pieces. And that's the same thing when it comes to love. There is no single person, no single romantic partner, for instance, that could satisfy all of the yearnings of someone's heart or soul or mind, right? There's always going to be like pieces left that are searching for another home. And that is what I see in a lot of infidelity. And I think, again, it's not a glitch in the system. It is built into the system, and it's just something that we have to deal with. And some people deal with it in some ways. Some people deal with it in others. Some people deal with it through, polyamory or what, some people deal with it through cheating, and some people are monogamous and faithful. And I'm not God, and I'm not here to sort out what's best. But I'm just saying it is an interesting thing. And, and so the challenge in life, and this is why we agonize so much over our decisions. The challenge in life is understanding that every decision you make will always entail problems and dissatisfaction. There is no path that is without dissatisfaction. Yes? There is no person that is perfect. Every relationship will have problems. The person will drive you crazy or whatever. And the same with decisions. If I choose this career, great, but it's going to have these problems. Or if I choose this career, great, but it's going to have these problems. Look at Johnny Depp and Marilyn Manson. They for many years were living what we would see as idealized lives, movie stars, rock stars. They have everything. But guess what they also had? A bunch of fucking problems. Okay? And that's even before the crazy Amber Heard and Evan Rachel Wood stepped into the picture. And one of the things that I've come to see is that in life, and I know that, again, this is just a truism, but the grass is always greener thing. I mean, there is something to that. Yes, there are people who are happier than other people. There are some choices that are better than other choices for us. But every choice that you make is going to have a downside. And so life is often about, mitigating the downside and trying to really expand on the upsides, right? But that's a careful thing to negotiate. Think about it in terms of your character. It is often true. It is very true. In fact, I think always that your greatest strength is also your greatest weakness, because that strength, that thing that is strong in your character, whatever it is, it also will bleed over into unhealthy excess, right? Because again, dichotomy. And so a lot of life is a challenge in mitigating the downsides of your personality, right? And kind of snipping at the excesses where they become unruly or problematic, while still trying to capitalize on and emphasize the upsides. So if you have a very bold personality, if you are someone who's very like take charge and ambitious, that's going to bring you a lot of benefits in life. But guess what? It's also going to bring you a number of problems. And that's what I'm trying to say here. And so I guess my point in all of this is just that as we go through our days, I think that it is helpful to be aware of this dichotomy that expresses itself in all kinds of different conflicts, both internal and external in our mind. And it can be something like romantic conflict. Who do I want to be with? Do I want to stay with this person? Don't I? Or it can be something like a professional conflict, or it can be an ethical conflict. Or it can be something as basic as, do I want, a cheeseburger, or do I want a salad today? The downside with the cheeseburger, the downside with the salad, is that salad won't taste very good. No, but burgers aren't that bad for you, right? Like, I mean, we've decided, haven't we, that protein is good for you, and it's the carbs that are bad. So if you leave off the bun, then you're okay. So I'm going to leave it with that, I guess. I hope this made some sense to people. So people like my philosophy, some people like my philosophy videos. So I'm going to try to keep putting these out. And I'm sorry for the informality of things today, but I just kind of got hit with this idea. And it's something I think about a lot anyway, but I just really felt like talking about it today. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Again, these videos of mine, they are not my most popular, and in order to make them, it's really helpful if those of you who like it will donate a little bit, because these don't get the views or the money on YouTube that my Manson stuff and my Johnny Depp stuff does, but I still like making these. So if you'd like these and you'd like to see more of them, please donate. Got the PayPal link down there. Again, most people, like I've said before, most people don't think anything of spending several bucks on a crappy Amazon movie, but someone that they listen to, time and time again on YouTube, they don't donate. So I don't know. I'm not begging for anyone's money, but I am, like I said, always going to continually remind people that it is appreciated and that I am trying to create a career out of this, hopefully. All right. Have a good day. Bye-bye.